We've all heard of the Darwin Awards. You see the headline, you laugh, you share the link with your friends, and you think, how could anyone possibly be that stupid? You think you're smart. You think you'd never end up as a headline. But here's the dark truth. The line between a normal person and a viral obituary is terrifyingly thin. It's not just about stupidity. It's about ego. It's about the blinding arrogance that makes a lawyer think he's stronger than a 24th-story window. It's about the desperate need for 5 minutes of fame that makes a YouTuber point a desert eagle at his own chest. Today, we're not just reading headlines. We are diving deep into the psychology and the fatal final moments of people who died in the dumbest, most tragic ways imaginable. And as always, this list, it only gets darker as it goes on. First story, Gary Hoy was a man who had it all. He was a senior partner at his law firm in Toronto, a respected corporate lawyer. He worked in a high-rise tower in a prestigious office on the 24th floor. And Gary had a party trick. It was a bizarre habit, one that blurred the line between confidence and pure, unfiltered ego. Whenever new law students or articling interns would visit the firm, Gary loved to give them a tour. He'd show them the boardroom, the library, and then he'd bring them to his own corner office, the one with the panoramic view of the city. And then he'd show them the trick. He liked to show them how strong the windows of the building were. This wasn't a lecture, it was a performance. He would tell the students to watch. He'd stand on the far side of his office, take a running start, and slam his entire body, full force, into the plate glass window. The window would shudder, but it would hold, every single time. Gary had done this dozens of times over the years. The students would gasp, he would laugh, and it would be a story they'd tell for the rest of their careers. It was the ultimate display of invincibility. On July 9th, 1993, Gary was giving another one of these tours to a group of new students. You can picture the scene. Young, nervous students in their oversized suits trying to look professional. And then there's Gary, the king of his castle. He gets that familiar glint in his eye. He delivers his line. "These windows can't break," he said. He runs backward, building up momentum, and then hurls himself at the glass. It worked perfectly. He bounced right off, just as he always did. The students were shocked. Gary, feeling good, decided to do it again. Maybe the first one wasn't dramatic enough. Maybe he wanted to really hammer the point home. He wanted to show them he wasn't just a lawyer. He was the man who could defy physics 24 stories in the air. He backed up again. He ran again. He threw himself at the window one more time. This time, the glass didn't break. The glass was, just as Gary claimed, unbreakable. But Gary, in all his years of performing this stunt, had overlooked a critical detail. He had tested the glass, but he had forgotten about the frame. The law students and his coworkers watched in absolute horror. This time, when Gary hit the glass, the entire window, frame and all, popped clean out of its casing. There was no bounce, there was just a horrifying pop, and then an open space where the window used to be. Gary Hoy went flying 24 stories down, riding the pane of glass all the way to the street below. He had hit that window so many times over the years that he had progressively loosened the frame, turning his office into a 24th story trapdoor that only he could spring. He died instantly. Gary Hoy proved the window was unbreakable. He just didn't prove the frame was. Gary Hoy became a legend, just not the way he wanted. His ego put him 24 stories in the ground. You'd think that's the dumbest way to go, but at least he had a motive. The man in our next story, he died for nothing but a bad joke. This brings us to Rome, January 18th, 1977. The man at the center of this story is Luciano Raccone, a 28-year-old footballer for Lazio. He was a star, known to his fans as the Blonde Angel. But to his friends, he was famous for something else, his constant, elaborate pranks. He was the guy who always took the joke one step too far. That day, Luciano had what he thought was a brilliant idea. He and his teammate, Pro Gadine, would stage a fake robbery. The target? Their friend Bruno Tabuccini's jewelry store. They figured it would be hilarious to scare Bruno, and then they'd all laugh about it later. But they missed one critical piece of context. Bruno's store had been robbed for real just a few weeks earlier. Bruno wasn't relaxed. He wasn't in on any joke. He was terrified it would happen again, and to protect himself, he had gotten a real shotgun, and he kept it in the store. His fear was 100% real. Luciano and Pro didn't know this, or they didn't care. They covered their faces, walked into the store with their guns out, and started yelling, "Hands in the air! This is a stick-up!" What happened next was a fatal collision between a prank and reality. When Bruno saw the robbers, his training kicked in. His worst fear was happening again. He pulled out his shotgun. The teammate, Pro, saw the shotgun, understood the danger immediately, and put his hands up. The prank was over for him. But Luciano, the blonde angel, kept going with the prank. He wouldn't put his gun down. He was committed to the joke. He was still in his own movie, while Bruno was in a real-life horror film. Bruno, terrified, pulled the trigger. He shot Luciano in the chest from close range. In that instant, the prank evaporated. Luciano fell to the floor. The joke finally finished. His last words were, "It's a joke. It's just a joke." But it was too late. He died 30 minutes later, leaving behind a wife and 2 children. He died for a laugh he never got. But at least his motive was just a twisted sense of humor. This final story, the motive was something we all see every day. The desperate need for YouTube views. This brings us to June 2017. Meet Pedro Ruiz and Mona Lisa Perez. They had a YouTube channel, but they had a problem. Their wholesome family videos weren't working. Nobody was watching. And in the attention economy, if you're not being watched, you don't exist. So they switched to pranks. And of course, the numbers went up. They got that first taste of small-time fame, that little hit of validation. Pedro figured if pranks worked, extreme pranks would work even better. He needed a stunt, something big, something that would make them go viral. He came up with what he thought was a simple test to see if a 1.5-inch thick encyclopedia could stop a bullet. The plan was meticulously stupid. Pedro would hold the encyclopedia to his chest. Mona Lisa would shoot it. But let's look at the variables, the fatal calculation that makes this a Darwin Award masterpiece. First, the audience. They didn't just film it, they invited over 30 friends to watch the spectacle live. This was a performance. Second, the distance. She wouldn't be shooting from across the yard. The plan was to shoot from 1 foot away. And third, the gun. This is the most insane part. They didn't use a small .22 caliber pistol. They chose a Desert Eagle, a .50 caliber handgun, one of the most powerful and destructive handguns in the world, famous for its insane stopping power. They set up the cameras. The 30 friends gathered around. Pedro pressed the book against his chest. He nodded. Mona Lisa raised the Desert Eagle, a handgun built with the stopping power of a small cannon. With just 1.5 inches of paper between the muzzle and her boyfriend, she pulled the trigger. The bullet wasn't even slowed down. It tore through the encyclopedia, it tore through Pedro, and he died instantly, on camera. A horrified Mona Lisa called the police, claiming she had accidentally shot her boyfriend. But the cameras were still rolling. The footage told the real story. This was no accident. This was a stunt they had planned, promoted, and filmed, all for clout. She eventually pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to 180 days in prison. And in the ultimate, tragic irony, the video went viral worldwide. They finally got the views they wanted, just not how they planned. So, what's the real lesson here? We have a lawyer who died from ego, a football star who died for a prank, and a YouTuber who died for views. It's easy to just laugh, to call them stupid and move on, but that's the shallow take. The real story, the dark psychology, is that all three of them died performing. Gary Hoy wasn't just checking a window. He was performing for those students. He needed their awe. He needed to be the invincible man on the 24th floor. His hubris demanded an encore, and that encore killed him. Luciano Raccione wasn't just playing. He was performing his identity as the prankster. He was so committed to his own joke, his own narrative, that he couldn't see the reality of the situation. He couldn't see the real shotgun or the real terror in his friend's eyes. He died for a punchline that never landed. And Pedro Ruiz, his is the most modern tragedy of all. He died performing for us, for the algorithm, for the view count. He died because Wholesome wasn't getting enough engagement, and he felt the pressure to escalate, to push the boundary from prank to lethal stunt. That's the real darkness of the Darwin Award. It's not some alien behavior found in people different from us. It's a fundamental part of human nature, just turned up to a fatal volume. It's that little voice in your head that says, this will be impressive, or this will be funny, or this will get 1 million views. These men just didn't have that other voice, the one that's supposed to scream, stop. The line between a funny story you tell at a party and a viral obituary is terrifyingly thin. It's just one single stupid decision where your ego overrides your survival instinct. This is just the tip of the iceberg. The world is full of these fatal moments of stupidity, these tragedies born from arrogance and bad ideas. What are some of the other insane Darwin Awards you've heard of? What's the most unbelievable, how did they think that was a good idea story you know? Let me know in the comments below. If I see enough good ones, they will absolutely end up in a part 2. If you enjoyed this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe.